Welcome to another edition of Head On. I'm your host, Ian Holmes, here on Shaw TV, and today examining the issue of water supply, the quality of water, and some concerns that have come to light from Nanaimo filmmaker Paul Manley. Should be a very interesting conversation, Paul, as we look into some of the challenges, real challenges that are not only mid-Vancouver Island-wide, but globally as well. And Paul, thanks so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me in.
Well, what we're going to do now, before we get into the program and learn a little bit more about troubled water, the context behind it, a trailer that we'll play for you right now, just to get a little bit more of an idea about the topic we're getting into. So we'll fire that up now.
People in Canada don't tend to think too much about water because we have a lot of it. So we have what I call the myth of abundance.
It's a gold rush type mentality. Anybody can access whatever volume of water they want, do whatever they want with it, and there's no regulation over it. We cannot afford to waste a valuable resource like our water.
Weyerhaeuser used chemical fertilizers for several years in the watershed without even bothering to inform the Greater Nanaimo Water District. We asked Weyerhaeuser in the city of Nanaimo, we raised the alarm and said, hey, you know, there's dioxins in those fertilizers, the most toxic substance known to humans. You should test for that. And they both refused.
There needs to be a huge raising of awareness as to how vulnerable and valuable and finite drinking water sources are.
We're in a catchment area for a well field that supplies water for 14,000 people. But upstream we have every kind of possible land use. We've got industrial, commercial, storage of materials, auto-wrecking, pig farm, septic systems. One of the comments I thought was the funniest was a local, RDN politician said, yeah, but we do chlorinate it. So I said, chlorinated picture is okay.
You know, it's one resource that we see in our territory that hasn't been destroyed. And I think if we start managing it better, we would all be better off tomorrow.
We are a planet running out of accessible clean water as the demand is going straight up. Those who control this dwindling supply of something we need for life, something the planet needs for life, are going to be powerful and they're going to be rich, and they know it.
So there's a little insight of troubled water, the trailer, a little condensed version of the work that local filmmaker Paul Manley has come up with. Paul, very interesting, the inner workings in terms of water shortage and quality concerns on mid-Vancouver Island. So talk a little bit to our viewers about what is troubled water. What's this documentary all about?
Well, we take our water for granted. So, you know, it comes out of the tap. We got great supply of fresh water, it seems like. It falls out of the sky like crazy around, you know, year-round almost here. And so we take it for granted, but there's a lot of things that people should be aware about with their water supply. And, you know, some of the local issues, most of the watersheds on Vancouver Island, with the exception of Victoria, are on private land. So that's where the water is falling and being collected or coming from aquifers, or, and there's a number of issues that relate to that. So, you know, some of the Nanaimo watershed, for instance, is owned by timber companies, and so there is active logging in the Jump Lake watershed. Parksville, they get their water from a well field. It's mainly recharged through by water that flows through Arrington, and you know, creeks and things that flow through Arrington. And there's auto wreckers and landfills and all kinds of industrial activity, wood processing, farming activity, that all could potentially contaminate that water supply. And so the film looks at a bunch of different issues related to water, including aquifer depletion. So there's a problem with aquifer depletion in Parksville. There's a problem with aquifer depletion in Yellow Point. In Yellow Point now people have to collect rainwater. You know, if you're going to build a house in Yellow Point, you have to have a rainwater collection system to try to get as much water as you can collect. And the largest water aquifer on the island is the Cassidy Aquifer underneath the airport. And it's a very shallow depth you know, if you go to the Harmac well sites, you don't have to look down very far to see where the water is in that aquifer. It's down, you know, 6, 10, 20 feet.
Now, my next question for you, Paul, and you laid it out with some of the industrial, commercial activities surrounding these watersheds around the region, and just looking to find out a little bit more about the actual risks to the quality of our water. I mean, it seems from the outside looking in relatively healthy. We haven't had a Walkerton, Ontario incident here. We do have water treatment regulations here, which are actually going to be enhanced here coming down the pipe here next year from the Vancouver Island Health Authority, actually, I believe in 2015, as it were. So what are some of these tangible water quality concerns, something that right now that we really should be worried about here locally?
Right. Well, one of the things that's talked about in the film is that water treatment system, and in Victoria, they spend less money on treatment because they own their watershed. And so there's no activities allowed in that watershed at all, including logging or forestry or, you know, even cutting salal or hiking or anything.
I guess that would be the ideal setup.
That's the ideal. So their treatment costs are much lower. And here we're spending $65, $70 million on a treatment plant. And we have active logging in our watershed. And if you fly up behind Jump Lake into those creeks, you'll see that there was, you know, a lot of logging in the last 10 years. So there's, you know, most of the growth back there is Christmas tree size. So they may not be logging so much there in the next 20 years, hopefully. But what that does is it causes turbidity and other issues, which then necessitate having a filtration through a treatment plant. And you know, higher levels of filtration. In Parksville, where you have auto wreckers in an area where the runoff could be flowing into Englishman River and then being picked up, you know, downstream for the water system, they don't test. They test, you know, for the biological contaminants. They might test for nitrogen or phosphates and things like that, but they're not testing for hydrocarbons. So they're not testing for things that could be, you know, leaking from those vehicles or would have leaked from those vehicles maybe 20, 30 years ago. And so all that stuff eventually makes its way down, you know, through the system. And those are the problems, the issues with contamination. So I mean, with Parksville, one of the solutions that's presented is to try to get a pipe that goes up above all those contamination sites, pipes it down, and then puts it into human-made aquifers that are sealed to store water. You know, so when the high runoff times, you store water for the summertime because they're running out of water in Parksville in the summertime in the dry months, right?
So on the water quality side, do you think there needs to be more of a buffer in terms of commercial industrial activities surrounding the watersheds where this water is picked up from and eventually ends up in our taps?
Yeah, there should be. One of the main problems, one of the key problems that's identified in the film is that there's no local control over what goes on in your watershed. So regional districts and cities really don't have an ability to regulate what happens in their watersheds unless they're right inside the city. And you know, those watersheds aren't inside cities. They're out in the forested mountain areas. And so another example of this is what's going on in Shawnigan right now. There's a proposal to fill a quarry with contaminated soil from Victoria, you know, from dredging up all the sludge in Rock Bay from the coal-fired plants that they had down there, contaminated gas station sites, you know, the dirt, the soil that they got to get rid of. They want to dump it all in this quarry that's at the headwaters of the Shawnigan water system. So the Shawnigan Creek flows right beside this site. There's another creek that flows right on the other side of it. It's also in a limestone area, so limestone formations have karst systems, they're cave systems where water can flow down into cave systems and move about very quickly. And that's the kind of system they have. They have a few of those systems in Port Alberni, which are being destroyed by logging and road building, but they're highly susceptible to contamination. So, you know, in Shawnigan, they have no control over that land use decision, which is highly problematic. It's the provincial government that's deciding, and those people don't need to drink the water in Shawnigan Lake.
So you have a lot of concerns on the water quality side here on the island. What about water supply? It's something I hear all the time from local governments, Nanaimo, Parksville, municipalities up and down Vancouver Island, and that's something that we should be worried about? Do you want to expand a little bit more on that, Paul?
Yeah, you think we had a lot of water here the way it rains, right? But it's the recharge of aquifers. You know, when they're drawn down as much as they are, they don't recharge as easily as, you know, some recharge quicker than others. And then, so like I was mentioning before, there's a problem out in Yellow Point. There's problems in Parksville. Lanceville's got water issues. They'd like to get onto the Nanaimo pipe, and because we go through severe droughts, you know, in this area in the summer months, and that we, you know, with issues with climate change, that's only going to get more drastic, I think. So we have to look at ways of protecting the water resources we have now, and, you know, working towards future, because one of the big problems is, of course, development, and we got a lot of development going on the east coast of the island, and not enough water to supply those developments, and that's a key issue.
Yeah, two big factors on supply is the droughts that we get in the summer months, and also development. This is an ever-developing region that we live in, and it leads into my next question about water conservation. And a lot of these bylaws in municipalities aren't really adhered to in terms of, you know, watering on an even number day in the summertime. Do you think this is something that could be leveraged a little bit harder to clamp down a little bit more and to get some serious results on the water conservation side, which there's results have been proven, a big impact can be made on that side?
Yeah, Victoria is another great example of a success story with this. So Victoria, in my interview, they bought the Leech River watershed, which is going to be another catchment area to add to the Souk Lake watershed. And so they're letting it grow back to a natural state. And they bought it, they thought they were going to need to use it sooner, but they don't need it for about 30 years now, based on the consumption going down for households in Victoria. So the population there has grown, but they've had rebate programs for toilets and washing machines and all kinds of irrigation systems and things like that, so that people can have, you know, green gardens and whatnot, but they're using a minimal amount of water, and that's been really successful in Victoria. And so they were planning on tapping into the Leech much sooner than they're going to need to, and they've bought this whole valley that they're going to let turn back into a natural system, because nature is the best filter for water.
Now, Paul, on the global stage, in terms of access to water, a sufficient supply, and also the quality side, I know worldwide this isn't just an issue here on Vancouver Island.
No.
I know you have some passionate opinions on, you know, the global scale on how this impacts the entire world. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
There's a couple of key things. Worldwide, we're seeing a big buyout of water systems all over the world. So there's privatization of municipal systems, so that large corporations own the systems, but there's also privatization of the aquifers and of the, you know, the land base where these watersheds are, because you know, water, as Maud Barlow calls it, is the blue gold. It's the oil of the next century, of this century, really. It's the gold rush. And water, we need it for life. You know, you can't live without water. And you know, you wouldn't pay for air, hopefully, and so you shouldn't have to pay for water, but it's becoming privatized and turning into a commodity. And, you know, we've seen actually major rebellions in the south when corporations have tried to control water, like in Bolivia. They privatized the whole water system, and it was illegal for people to have rain barrels to catch the rain that flowed off of their roofs. And people, you know, rose up. There was a big backlash to it. And Bechtel, the company that had their operation down there, eventually had to walk away.
Now, Paul, before we wrap things up here, just enough time here to promote when Troubled Water will be broadcasting here on Shaw, and when some of the upcoming telecasts are.
It's going to be on Shaw here, April 19th, 20th, and 21st. So April 19th, it's playing in the evening, 10:30. The 20th, it's playing, I think, at 11 a.m. And on the 21st, it's playing at 2 p.m., I believe. Yep. And we're going to be putting it online on YouTube, on manlymedia.com, and on YouTube/Troubled Water for a free broadcast on Earth Day. So from Earth Day on, it'll be online, and anybody can watch it for free. And if you want to support the film, there's an Indiegogo campaign right now on my website, manlymedia.com.
Outstanding stuff. Paul, we're flat out of time. Thanks so much. This is a very interesting conversation. Water supply quality here on mid-Vancouver Island and around the world. Population's going up, and water supply, it's a hot commodity, so we'll drink to that.
Yeah, don't take it for granted.
There you go. That's another edition of Head On Shaw TV. I'm Ian Holmes. Tune in next time.